The New England Patriots are actively exploring the edge rusher market this offseason. And if a blockbuster move for Maxx Crosby does not materialize, there is another name gaining serious traction behind the scenes: Thibodeaux. According to NFL insider Connor Hughes, the New York Giants are shopping Thibodeaux, and league sources reportedly find it difficult to envision a team partying with more than a fourth-round pick to acquire him. Even more telling, another New York voice, Art Stapleton, suggested that if asked whether Thibodeaux would be on the Giants roster by Week 1, the likely answer would be no. That immediately raises the question Patriots fans should be asking. If New York is ready to move on, why shouldn't New England pick up the phone? We all watched this defense last season. Inside, there is talent. Milton Williams and Christian Barmore held things down in the middle at times, but the edge presence simply was not consistent enough. Once Harold Landry went down with his knee injury, the pressure off the edge dropped significantly. Anthony Jennings has strengths, but he is not a pure pass rusher. The rotation never truly scared opposing quarterbacks. When you step back and evaluate the roster honestly, edge rusher stands out as the most critical need. That lines up with reporting tied to The Athletic, indicating that the Patriots internally view edge as their #1 priority this offseason. Head coach Mike Vrabel's long-stated philosophy of building through the trenches reinforces that mindset. After investing heavily in the offensive line last year, the expectation now is a significant overhaul on the defensive edge. Whether that comes via the draft, free agency, or trade, the message is clear: something has to change. This is where Thibodeaux becomes fascinating. He is still only 25 years old. Yes, 2025 was not his strongest campaign statistically, finishing with just 2.5 sacks in 10 games. But context matters. The Giants added Brian Burns and Abdul Carter, and Thibodeaux became the odd man out in certain packages. Despite the lower sack total, he still produced 32 pressures in limited action. And we cannot ignore what he showed in 2023. 11.5 sacks, 43 pressures, and 50 tackles while starting all 17 games. That is high-level production from a former top 5 draft pick. The Patriots' current depth chart at edge leaves room for serious upgrades. Calvin Chasen is a pending free agent. Harold Landry is returning from injury and struggled late last season. Jennings remains more reliable against the run than as a pass rush threat. Young players like Elijah Ponder show promise, but promise alone does not collapse pockets in January. Braden Swinson, coming out of LSU, did not carve out the immediate impact role many expected. Financially, this situation becomes even more strategic. Reports from the Boston Herald indicate that while the Patriots have interest in players like Jalen Phillips, Trey Hendrickson, and Odafe Way, they are preparing to potentially be priced out of the top tier. High-end edge rushers on the open market command serious money, often in the $14 million per year range or more. If the Patriots are hesitant to allocate that level of cap space, the trade route becomes significantly more attractive. New England currently holds 11 draft picks. That kind of draft capital gives flexibility. If Thibodeaux's market truly settles around a 3rd or 4th round selection, the Patriots have the ammunition to make it happen without crippling their future. A 4th round pick, especially when you have multiple, is a manageable price for a player who has already demonstrated double-digit sack upside. However, there is another layer to this conversation. Chasen's market value was once projected near $14 to $15 million annually, but more recent reporting suggests his range could fall between $8 and $11 million. That is a substantial difference. Thibodeaux, on his 5th-year option, would cost approximately $15 million for one season. So the Patriots face a clear fork in the road: commit long-term at a lower annual cost to Chasen, or take a 1-year swing on Thibodeaux's upside and potentially push into a more aggressive win-now posture. There is risk either way. Chasen could regress after a late breakout. Thibodeaux could fail to recapture his 2023 form, but standing still is not an option if this defense is going to take the next step. The Patriots will add an edge rusher. That much feels inevitable. The real question is which path they choose. Do they trust the draft at pick 31? Do they pay market value in free agency? Or do they capitalize on a rare opportunity to acquire a former top 5 talent entering his prime at a potentially discounted trade cost? Because here's where this decision really starts to define the identity of the 2026 Patriots. If the front office pulls the trigger on a trade for Thibodeaux, it signals urgency. It signals that this team believes it is closer than people think. You do not trade draft capital and absorb a $15 million 5th-year option unless you believe that player can immediately tilt games in your favor. And let's be honest, We have already seen Thibodeaux do that before. 11.5 sacks in a season is not theoretical upside. That already happened. 43 pressures in 2023 is not projection. That is proven disruption. Now imagine pairing that kind of edge threat with interior push. When you collapse the pocket from both the inside and the outside, quarterbacks do not step up comfortably. They rush throws, they make mistakes, and in a conference loaded with elite quarterback play, that matters more than ever. The Patriots have been solid defensively, but solid is not enough if you want to contend deep into January. You need records. At the same time, the risk cannot be ignored. This would be a one-year rental unless an extension is negotiated. That means you are either betting on a big bounce-back season and then preparing to pay even more next year, or you are accepting that this is a short-term push. For a team that has emphasized long-term roster construction, that is a philosophical pivot. On the other hand, re-signing K'Lavon Chaisson at a projected $8 to $11 million per year offers cost control and continuity. You know the system fit. You know the locker room presence, and if his late development trend continues upward, you may be locking in a productive edge at below market value. That is how smart teams stay flexible financially. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Chaisson has not yet delivered a season like Thibodeaux's 2023 campaign. That ceiling matters. When you are talking about competing with the best offenses, sometimes you have to prioritize ceiling over comfort. Then there is the draft route. With 11 total picks, including a third and multiple fourth-rounders, the Patriots could absolutely invest in a young edge prospect at pick 31 or later. That route is cheaper and gives you 4 years of team control. But rookie edge rushers often take time to develop. If the expectation is immediate pressure production, the draft is rarely the fastest solution. So this decision becomes a balancing act between timeline, budget, and belief. Do the Patriots believe they are one impact edge rusher away from becoming a serious threat? If they do, Thibodeaux makes sense. If they believe they are still layering foundational pieces, the draft or a lower cost re-signing might be the smarter play. There is also leverage at play. If the Giants are truly motivated to move on, the Patriots can be patient. They do not need to overbid. They can let the market settle. If the price truly hovers around a fourth-round pick, that becomes very tempting given the depth of New England's draft board. And let's not ignore the psychological element. Bringing in a former top 5 pick who might feel something to prove can energize a defense. A fresh start matters in this league. We have seen players revive their careers simply by changing environments and roles. If the coaching staff believes they can unlock the 2023 version of Thibodeaux consistently, that is a gamble worth examining closely. At the end of the day, this offseason is about defining direction. Aggressive trade, measured re-signing, developmental draft investment. Each path tells us something about how the Patriots view their current window. Now, it comes back to you. If you are sitting in that front office chair, are you sending a fourth-round pick to New York and betting on Kayvon Thibodeaux's upside? Or are you sticking with the long-term approach and building through free agency or the draft instead? If Kayvon Thibodeaux walks into that locker room, this defense immediately changes structurally and strategically. Start with alignment flexibility. Thibodeaux has shown he can win standing up or with his hand in the dirt. That allows the Patriots to disguise fronts pre-snap without substituting personnel. You can show a traditional four-man front and shift into a hybrid look late. You can overload one side. You can stunt him inside on passing downs. The key is that offensive lines now have to account for him every snap. That alone opens opportunities for everyone else. Think about what that does for the interior. When edge pressure forces tackles to overset or keep tight ends in protection, the defensive tackles see more one-on-one matchups. That is where interior push becomes devastating. Quarterbacks hate interior pressure more than edge pressure because they cannot step up. If Thibodeaux commands extra attention outside, the middle benefits instantly. It also reshapes third down packages. One of the biggest frustrations last season was watching quarterbacks sit comfortably on 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8. Pressure would be close, but not quite there. Coverage can only hold up for so long in today's NFL. Adding a proven double-digit sack threat changes the math. Instead of dialing up risky blitzes, you can trust your front four more often. That keeps 7 in coverage and reduces exposure in the secondary. Now flip it to the run game. Thibodeaux is not just a situational pass rusher. At 25, with his athletic profile and experience, he sets a stronger edge than people sometimes give him credit for. That matters in a division where controlling the perimeter run game is critical. Edge defenders are responsible for forcing runs back inside. Discipline there prevents explosive plays, but here's the long-term ripple effect. If the Patriots trade for him and he produces, you are suddenly negotiating an extension from a position of urgency. If he delivers 10 or more sacks, his price skyrockets. The team then has to decide whether to commit major money to him or risk losing the asset after giving up draft capital. That is why this decision cannot be emotional. It has to be strategic. If they extend him, you are building your defensive identity around a young edge cornerstone that affects future drafts, cap allocations, and scheme continuity. If they treat him as a one-year push, you are signaling an aggressive competitive window right now. Compare that to drafting an edge at pick 31. A rookie gives you developmental upside, but likely inconsistent early returns. You would be betting on coaching and patience. It is a slower burn, but potentially more cost-efficient. Resigning Kylevan Chasen sits in the middle. Familiar system, lower projected annual cost. Less volatility, but perhaps also a lower ceiling. The Patriots have to ask themselves a hard question. Is steady improvement enough, or do they need impact? This is not just about sacks. It is about identity. For years, the Patriots' best defenses were defined by versatility and timely pressure. They did not always have the flashiest names, but they had players who could close. Right now, this defense feels like it is missing that closer off the edge. And if the front office truly believes edge is the #1 need, as has been reported, then a passive approach does not match that urgency. You cannot call something your biggest weakness and then address it halfway. So here we are. Trade draft capital for a former top 5 talent entering his prime and bet on a resurgence. Re-sign a developing player at a potentially team-friendly number, or draft and build patiently. This decision will tell us exactly how the Patriots view themselves heading into 2026. If you believe this team is ready to push now, make the move and bring in Thibodeaux. If you believe the smarter play is long-term flexibility, stick with the draft or a re-signing. And there is one more layer that cannot be ignored in all of this: locker room dynamics and leadership tone. When you bring in a player who was drafted in the top 5, there is an expectation attached to that name. That expectation can either weigh on a player or fuel him. In a new environment, with a coaching staff that clearly prioritizes trench dominance, that kind of player can feel re-energized. A change of scenery often resets narratives. Instead of being the odd man out in a crowded room, he becomes the focal point of a defensive adjustment. That kind of psychological shift matters more than fans sometimes realize. Defensive units feed off confidence. When one player consistently collapses the edge, it raises the energy level across the front 7. Linebackers trigger faster. Defensive backs trust the timing of routes less because they know the quarterback will not have forever. Everything speeds up. From a roster building standpoint, this is also about asset management. The Patriots have 11 draft picks. Realistically, not all 11 rookies make meaningful contributions. Packaging one mid-round selection to acquire a player with proven NFL production can be viewed as converting uncertainty into known ability. A 4th-round pick might develop into a contributor, or it might not. A 25-year-old edge rusher who has already posted double-digit sacks has a clearer floor, but the counter-argument remains strong. Draft picks are cheap, controllable, and flexible. If the Patriots believe they can identify and develop edge talent internally, keeping those picks preserves cap health and long-term sustainability. The franchise has historically valued flexibility. Big swings have not always been their default move. That is why this decision feels different. It is not just transactional, it is philosophical. It asks whether the Patriots are ready to accelerate their timeline. If they trade for an established edge and he delivers immediately, the conversation around this defense changes overnight. Suddenly,